in verses 1 through 6. This is Jesus speaking again. He says, "Truly I tell you, anyone who doesn't enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens it for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. When he has brought all his own outside, he goes ahead of them. The sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will never follow a stranger. Instead, they'll run away from him because they don't know the voice of strangers." Jesus gave them this figure of speech or this metaphor, but they did not understand what he was telling them. So here's where we find ourselves in the Gospel of John, in this study of the Gospel of John. If you're new to Frontline, what's normal for us, what makes up the bulk of preaching on Sundays, is we just walk through books of the Bible and see what the Lord has for us in there. And so here's where we find ourselves. Jesus is still at this festival where he's in an argument again, not because Jesus likes to argue, but because religious leaders like to argue with Jesus. So they're arguing with Jesus. And what we saw last week from Pastor Dylan is that there was a blind man, that Jesus healed this blind man, and then the religious leaders, rather than being like, "Oh my goodness, this guy's been blind," they're like, "Why can you see now? And how did this happen? And why did this happen? And we don't like what's happening." And so they kind of miss what Jesus is doing. Jesus is helping them see through physically healing a blind man, their spiritual blindness. They miss it all. And there's actually, like, if you didn't know, there wasn't originally chapters and verses when the Bible was written. We put those there because we would spend all of today, if I was like, open your scroll to John and go like a quarter of the way through until you find this verse. They put it there so that we could be like, okay, I know where the preacher is. But there's no break. Like if you notice, this is John 9, 40 and 41, the end of John chapter 9. So some of the Pharisees, religious leaders, who were with him heard these things that Jesus was saying, and they asked him, "We aren't blind too, are we?" Again, he's trying to see, like, yeah, this guy was physically blind. Y'all are spiritually blind. And they're like, "Whoa, I don't like that. We're the religious leaders. We're not blind." And Jesus tells them in verse 41, "If you were blind," he told them, "you wouldn't have sin. But now that you say we see, your sin remains." No break, right into chapter 10, verse 1. "Truly, I tell you, anyone who doesn't enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way is a thief and a robber." So Jesus is actually, in this metaphor, trying to help religious leaders see that they are not good shepherds, but that he is a good shepherd. Now, in the Near East, shepherding is just different. Like, if we have any concept of shepherding probably here, it's because we've watched like cool videos from Ireland or Scotland. And you're like, "Man, I love when they send those sheepdogs out and he just uses a word and the sheepdog knows what's right and left." And you kind of look at your dog and you're like, "You are a moron. You can't do anything." That's my dog. But our perception of shepherding is either a shepherd or a dog behind a group of sheep, nipping at their heels, trying to corral them into something. Well, if you've been in the Near East, you know that that's actually not how shepherding works there. In the Near East, in Central Asia, and Israel, and in these areas, shepherds actually walk in front of their sheep and their sheep follow them. It was actually fascinating when we were at the orphanage because one day, most days there was a shepherd who was leading the sheep into this field that was out there by the orphanage. And the shepherd he would walk from the front and the sheep would all follow. One day there was, I don't know if it was like the shepherd's son or a kid who was hired by the shepherd, but the sheep did not listen to him like the shepherd. So he actually had to be behind them with a stick, like go in the right direction. We need to understand how shepherding worked to kind of wrap our heads around this metaphor. Because when we think shepherding, again, we're picturing beautiful green pastures in Ireland and Scotland where the sheep are just, they can eat anywhere they want and they're up on mountains and it's all green and there's food everywhere. In the Near East, especially in Israel, where Jesus is using this metaphor, It's very arid and dry. Shepherds have to have a lot of skill. They have to know where water is. They have to know how to get the sheep to water. They have to know where the pastures are where they can feed. They have to be aware of where the wolves are, how to protect the sheep. It's a very, very skilled role. So when like a shepherd would be with the sheep all the time. This idea of a sheepfold during this time, that there would be multiple families, because not everybody could afford their own sheep pens. Multiple families in a village would use the same sheep pen. And the sheep know the shepherd so well that when the right shepherd goes and says, hey, whatever they say, hey, sheep, come follow me, and whatever, I don't know what they say. I'd be a terrible shepherd. The right sheep will come out. And not the sheep that aren't this. I mean, it's really fascinating. There's videos on this on YouTube that you can see how well they know the shepherd's voice. That's what Jesus is, that's what he's trying to help them see that picture. Now, I want to just ask 2 questions today. This is going to frame up the rest of our time. I want to ask of the text, this is good to do when you study the Bible, what is Jesus saying? Like, just what is being said in this text? And why is Jesus saying it, right? I'm like simple-minded Southern, this is just who I am, right? What's Jesus saying? Why is he saying it? So first question, what is Jesus saying? That's okay to ask, because they kind of ask the same question. Jesus starts, he's telling them they're blind, and they're like, we're not blind. And then he starts talking about sheep, and they're like, what in the world? What is being said? Look at verse 6. Jesus gave them this figure of speech, but they didn't understand what he was saying. They're like, well, I don't get it. So it's okay for to ask that question. So here's Jesus' answer. Look at verse 7. Here's how he answers it. He says, truly I tell you, I am the gate, or I am the door for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep didn't listen to them. I am the gate, he says again. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. A thief, verse 10, comes only to steal and destroy. I have come so that they may have life and have it in abundance. Verse 11, I am the good shepherd. He's interpreting this metaphor for them, this picture. I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, since he's not the shepherd and doesn't own the sheep, leaves them and runs away when he sees a wolf coming. The wolf then snatches and scatters them. This happens because he is a hired hand, and he doesn't care about the sheep. He says again, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, I lay down my life for the sheep. So what is Jesus saying? First, Jesus is the gate. Jesus is the gate, or Jesus is the door. When he's saying this, what would happen both in the villages where the sheep were, and then when they led them out into the wilderness for extended times of grazing, there would be these sheep pens or these sheepfolds. And a shepherd would lead the sheep into that place so that there would be protection from thieves and protection from wolves. And at that gate, like in a village, there would be an actual gate that you would open and that you would close. But when they're out grazing in the wilderness, there actually typically wasn't a gate like that. There would be all these stones that were stacked up. The shepherd would lead the sheep in there, and then the shepherd himself would stand in that gap and sleep in that gap. And it would provide safety and protection for the sheep. So when Jesus says he's the gate, he's saying, I am the way into the family of God. I provide both entrance into the family of God, like you can't get into the family of God on your own, and he stands there as protection for the family of God, for the sheep of God. That's what he's saying when he says, I am the gate. This is John 14, verse 6. When Thomas is like, Jesus says again, hey, I'm going where I'm going, you can't come. And they're like, whoa, where are you going and how do we get there? He says in John 14, verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So as good as it sounds, and as much as like in this cultural moment, we want to say, you just pick your path to God. You just pick the way that you want to go, and every road eventually leads to God. Jesus is like, no, let me give you this picture of how sheep work and how they're brought into the fold and how they're protected, and it's not through the sheep saying, I'm going to choose my own path. Anyone who's spent time with sheep knows that when they choose their own path, it goes very badly. I don't know if you've seen the video. This like describes my life with Jesus, but there's this video of a shepherd. There's this like really small ditch, and there's a sheep in there, and all you can see is its bottom and like two legs wiggling around. The sheep is like buried himself in this ditch, and the shepherd is like, "Gun, son of a gun," and he goes down there. And he's like pulling him out. And he pulls him out, and the sheep starts running and jumps and goes right back into the ditch. Like, it's a great video, and it's a great metaphor for what following Jesus feels like, at least to me, most days. I'm like, oh my goodness, you saved me from that again. Thanks. Hop, hop, ditch. You're like, oh, and the sheep can't get itself out. Jesus is saying he is the only way into the family of God, and he is our protector while we're there, right? And I think there's a helpful question, because here's how I think a lot of us live our lives. We really do believe that Jesus is the gate. He's the door that brings us into the family of God. But then we become the gate after that. We'll protect ourselves. We'll protect others. I'm going to choose for me what's best. I'm going to guard myself. So I think a helpful question is Jesus the gate, or are you the gate? Are you the one that defends yourself, protects yourself, makes sure everything is going to be okay? Because he's not just the doorway into the family of God, he's protection once you're there. And I think we tend to view ourselves as the gate in a whole lot of different ways. One of them is, if I can just keep doing the right things, I'll be on God's good side and I'll stay in the family of God. Well, hey, Jesus is the doorway and is still the doorway. He's the one that keeps you in the family of God. It's not your good works. It's not how many Bible verses you have memorized. It's not whether or not you remain a virgin until you get married. It's not no matter how well it's not how well you do or don't do as a mother. Jesus is the one who protects you, who guides you. He is the gate. He's also saying, this is the second thing, that he's the good shepherd. He says that twice. He says that he's the gate twice, and he says that he's the shepherd twice. In verse 7 and verse 9, he says he's the gate. In verse 11 and verse 14, he says that he's the good shepherd. Now, it's interesting, why would he say he's the good shepherd? This is, again, the way, if you're new here, the way that I tend to preach is I want you to read the Bible the same way, to ask questions like this. That's interesting. He didn't say that he's the good gate or the strong gate or anything like that. He does say he is the good shepherd. Why would he say that? Well, the people of Israel were used to really terrible shepherds. Really terrible shepherds. You see there's countless passages all throughout the Old Testament where God is after the shepherds of Israel, the leaders of Israel, for their failure to effectively shepherd his people, to be with them. God has these rulers and these shepherds who are meant to, under his shepherding, love, guide, lead, protect, feed the people of God. And they are utter failures of that. If you have time this week, read Ezekiel 34. Ezekiel 34 is such a terrifying and beautiful passage. It's terrifying for anyone who is a pastor, who is a shepherd, because Jesus comes in and he's like, you have oppressed people. You have put yourself first. You have demanded things from people but not given to people. He lets the shepherds of Israel have it, and then he says, I'm actually going to step in now. I'm going to step in as my people's shepherd. I'm going to care for them. I'm going to guide them. I'm going to lead them. And then he promises that he's going to bring a true and a better shepherd who he calls David, which is interesting because the people of Israel, David was this shepherd king, the shepherd warrior for the people of God who, if you're not familiar with the story of the Old Testament, that's okay. There was this guy, David. God chooses him as a boy who is a shepherd of these sheep, and he makes him king over his people, Israel. And he's the best shepherd, the best king that people of Israel have. And so, by the time Ezekiel 34 is written, David's dead, right? What God is doing is he's saying there is a true and a better David who's going to come and be the good shepherd that the people of Israel need. Jesus stands in this moment and says, I'm the good shepherd. The people of Israel would have thought of Ezekiel 34. There's this promise that there's a good shepherd who's coming, and Jesus is taking up that mantle. Like, make no mistakes, Jesus claimed to be God over and over and over again. It's what leads him to the cross. He is the good shepherd. He's the gate, the door to the family of God. He provides entrance and protection, and Jesus is the good shepherd. That's what he's saying. He's using this picture of sheep and a sheepfold and a thief and a shepherd, all that. Now, why is Jesus saying that? He says he's the gate. He says he's the shepherd. These are two of his 7 I am statements in the Gospel of John. Why is he saying it? Put as simply as I can, he wants you to know who he is and who you are. That's why he's using this picture. He wants you to know who he is and who you are. So first, who is Jesus? Jesus knows his sheep. Do you notice this language? Look again at verse 3 and 4. It says, the sheep hear his voice, the shepherd, the good shepherd, Jesus. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. When he has brought all his own outside, he goes ahead of them. The sheep follow him because they know his voice. Verse 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Jesus knows his sheep. And when the Bible uses the word know, it's not like, yeah, I know things about my sheep. That one has this weird spot on him, and that one only walks in circles because he's a little dumb, and that one, he gets stuck in the ditch all the time, and that one over there, she's my favorite. And that's not what it means. When the Bible talks about Jesus knowing his people, it's intimate language. He knows the deep parts of people that others don't know. He knows things about his sheep that even the sheep don't know about themselves. He knows about their motivations, their fears, their insecurities, their overconfidence, their pride, how they need God, how they think they don't need God. Jesus knows all those things. Now, I think if we're honest, that's what we want most in life. That's what we want most in life. Dr. Kurt Thompson says that we're all born looking for someone looking for us. That's how we come into this world. Like, if you've had a kid, you know that kid comes into the world looking for someone who's looking for them. That's what we want. It's what we desire most in life. And I think it's the thing that we're simultaneously most afraid of in life, to actually be known. Because there are parts of us that we do everything we can to keep unknown to everyone else. And we try to lie to ourselves about who we really are and what our motivations are, what we do when no one else is looking. And so we want to be known, and the pattern of our life often is when someone knows those parts of us, that's when they leave. That's when they bail. That's when they turn their back. That's when great harm is caused. So do you see this tension that we're in? I desperately want to be known, but not too known, because if someone knows me too much, they'll probably leave me. Jesus knows his sheep. He knows parts of you that you don't know, and his gaze is still towards you. Like this word attuned, that's what, when we're born looking for someone looking for us, we're looking for someone to be attuned to us. Jesus' attunement is there are parts of you that you don't even know, that if you did know would make you turn your back on yourself, and Jesus says, you're mine. I know you. I'm going to keep walking with you. Jesus knows his sheep. That's what makes him a good shepherd. He's a good shepherd who knows his sheep. He's also a good shepherd who leads his sheep. You see this in verse 4. It says he calls his own sheep by name and he leads them out. When he has brought them all outside, he goes ahead of them. The sheep follow him because they know his voice. I think for so many of us, our perception of Jesus as shepherd is the same way we view sheepdog in Ireland. That Jesus is just like up in your grill behind you, nipping at your heels, and just kind of waiting for you to go on the wrong path. And then he's there, and he's going to bite you in the leg. Then you go this way, he's going to bite you in the leg. when Jesus talks about being the shepherd, he's got how shepherding works in Israel in mind. And how shepherding works there is what sheep do is they follow their shepherd. The shepherd isn't behind them with a whip driving them. He's not sicking his dog on them to get them where he wants them to go. He's walking where he wants them to go and saying, follow me. This is Jesus in Matthew 11. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden. I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come to me. This is what he's saying. He's a good shepherd who leads his sheep. And this is what we need. I think it would be helpful to ask the question, do you view Jesus as leading you or as driving you? That he's behind you with his arm crossed like, okay, you got 3 paths. Choose wisely or the dog's going to get you. Isn't that how we view Jesus? Like we're in front, Jesus is behind, and we live our lives looking over our shoulder. Like, are you proud of me? Are you not? Am I doing right? Am I not? I mean, this is how so many of you like grew up with parents that you're like, I spend my life like, is it enough? Is it not? I don't know. That's not how Jesus leads his sheep. He doesn't drive his sheep like a slave master, like a taskmaster. He's out in front leading his sheep because he's a good shepherd. Do you notice that it says the sheep follow Jesus because they know his voice? I think another helpful question is, do you know the voice of Jesus? Are you familiar with the voice of Jesus? Which also, like when Jesus is trying to help us see that we're sheep, it means that we're following something. There's voices that we are listening to. And I mean, I can't answer this for you, but I think it would be helpful to consider what voices am I listening to? What paths am I following? And is it the voice of Jesus? And maybe today, if you're like, I don't know if it is. I don't know what that voice sounds like. You need to talk to someone. We'll have time at the end where there'll be people to minister to you who would love to remind you of the voice of Jesus, remind you of what he says about you, over you. Do you know the voice of Jesus? What voices are you listening to? He's a good shepherd who knows his sheep and leads his sheep. Third, he lays down his life for his sheep. He says in verse 11, he says it 2 more times in verse 15 and 17, but he says, I'm the good shepherd. And he doesn't leave us to just interpret that on our own, to be like, well, what do you imagine a good shepherd's like? Oh, it's kind of Jesus for me. I imagine him like this. He just says, no, I'm a good shepherd. Here's how I'm a good shepherd. He lays down his life for the sheep. He knows his sheep. He leads his sheep. He lays down his life. This is Jesus headed to the cross where we deserve to hang because of our rebellion against God. He's saying, as the good shepherd, he's not driving us to punishment. He's out in front of us, actually saying in that moment, don't follow me here. I'm going here for you in your place. He's the good shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep. Now, he's told us who he is. Do you remember we said he's using this metaphor so that we would know not just who he is, but who we are? So here's a question I want to ask you. Are you able to see yourself as a sheep? Sheep are utterly dependent on their shepherd. And I know, I can feel it. Hey, I can feel it. Because I'm there with you. Like, I don't like to view myself as a sheep. Now, you can look at my life and be like, you have some very sheep-like tendencies and patterns, you know? There's that ditch that you just keep hopping right into. And he's like, okay, I'm going to get you out of this. And then you're like, yep, right back in that hole. Sheep instinctively follow the voice of their shepherd. And I know it's difficult because here's what happens in my head as I consider this question. Do I view myself as a sheep? I'm like, no. I think of the American Sniper movie. I'm like, no, there's 3 kinds of people in the world. There's sheepdogs, and there's wolves. Wolves take advantage of the weak. I'm not that. Sheep get taken advantage of, I'm not that. I'm the sheepdog. Like that metaphor, not in the Bible, right? It's not one of the two options in there, okay? Part of us following Jesus is learning that we actually are sheep, that we're not as smart as we think we are, that we don't have it as together as we think we do or as much as we wish we would, that we can't blaze the path on our own and just decide where we're going to go on our own. We can, and it leads to a ditch over and over and over again. For some of you, you just need to embrace the identity that Jesus calls me sheep. But hey, how does Jesus relate to his sheep? He's not, what he does not want for you. Jesus is not like, you're a sheep, but I want you to be a sheepdog. Toughen up, be stronger. That's not what he wants. He wants you to just say, I'm dependent on my shepherd. It's okay. And here's what's beautiful. He knows his sheep. He's not surprised by that. If you go to Jesus today and you're like, I have been trying to earn my own identity, I've been trying to make you proud, I've been trying to be as good of a mother as I could, or I've been trying to be okay with the fact that you're saying no to me, and here I am, and I'm angry, and I'm frustrated, and I don't know what to do, he's going to say, just follow me. Because he's a good shepherd. This metaphor is difficult for me, but it is encouraging because what it means is Jesus actually knows me. As I discover parts of my heart that I'm like, I don't like that. Or as I'm like, why am I still battling the same sin or the same tendency? Why do I still get angry in these moments? Jesus isn't a shepherd who's like, figure it out on your own. He's saying to you as a sheep, listen for my voice and follow me. Listen for my voice and follow me. So last question. How will you respond? Look at this in verse 19. Jesus has given this metaphor to them, and like not everybody loves it. Not everybody's like, this is awesome. I love being a sheep. Sheep are my favorite. I want to be just like them. Look at how people respond. Again, the Jews were divided because of these words. Many of them were saying, he has a demon and he's crazy. Why do you listen to him? Like, there are people who are like, the Bible's boring and I don't get it. It's helpful as you read and study the Bible. Just picture yourself there. Picture this environment, this scene unfolding. Jesus is like, I'm the good shepherd. You're the sheep. People are like, you're crazy and I think you have a demon. You know, like I just can't imagine Jesus being like, I know my sheep. I feed my sheep. I love them. I protect them. And they're like, oh, and you have a demon. Others were saying, these aren't the words of someone who is demon possessed. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? They're saying, we might not like what he said, but that guy can see now, and he didn't used to be able to see, and I don't think demons can do that. Jesus is polarizing, man. We want to, in our culture, make him like the cuddly Jesus that everybody loves, and he would never offend anyone, and he would tell them, you live your best life and be the best version of yourself that you can be, and that's enough. He says, no, it's not enough. I laid down my life for you because it's not enough. You could never be good enough to open the gate into the family of God. He said, no, I had to do that for you. And you may be here thinking, I am one step away from being hucked out of the family of God. Like a sheep who's like, you won't listen, I'll huck you out. He's like, no, I'm the gate. I'm the one who protects. I keep you from the danger of yourself and of others. He lays down his life. And here's what John says towards the end of his gospel. He says, like, this is why he writes these things, so that we would believe in Jesus and in believing have life. And that's the call, and I get it. Like, you're like, come up with a different sermon. Here's what God says. You can't do it. Jesus did it perfectly in your place. Believe and follow him. Shalom, you know? Like, that's what I need every week. I need to be reminded because what I do, I guarantee you, I will go out this week and like a dumb sheep diving in a ditch. I'll be like, okay, my identity depends on how well I do this week. And Jesus is like, no. This is what I've done. He's the gate that provides entrance into the family of God, and he protects you. He's the good shepherd who lays down his life for you. He knows you. He leads you. So the question is, will you believe and follow him? Let's pray. Jesus, it's not easy to admit that we're sheep. For so many of us, we want the story of our lives to be I'm strong enough, I'm courageous enough, I can do it, people can depend on me. And part of you knowing us is knowing that we can often fool others. Sometimes we can fool ourselves. But you really know us. And even as I say that, I stand in the tension of that seeming beautiful and feeling terrifying at the same time. And so I pray for my friends in here who don't feel known by you, or who feel if they really were known by you, you wouldn't want them. And I pray that what they would hear is the voice of a good shepherd who says, I've laid down my life for you. Follow me. It's in your name, Jesus, that we pray. Amen.